Welcome to She Said, the only program of rock and roll comparisons and contrasts. I'm Lanea Stagg, the culinary chef and author of the Recipe Record series, which is a series of 4 groovy rock and roll cookbooks that mix and blend rock history, facts, trivia, and photos with delicious and easy to prepare recipes themed for music genres and bands. To take a peek at these books and to order them for Mother's Day, which is just around the corner, go to my website at laneastagg.com, LaneaSpagg.com, and sign up for my rock and roll blog and newsletter as well.
And hey everyone, I am Jude Southerland Kessler, author of the John Lennon series. It's a 9-volume expanded biography that chronicles the life of John Lennon and, of course, his mates, the Beatles, in a very highly researched historical narrative format. And I have good news for those of you who've been waiting to purchase the ebook of Volume 4, Should Have Known Better, which tells the story of the Beatles in 1964. It's good news. Are you ready for this? Drum roll, please. Yes, Volume 4 is now finally available on Kindle, Nook, and every ebook format. So to order it, you can just go to my website, johnlennonseries.com, or to your ebook provider, whatever that may be.
Jude and I are very, very busy these days getting ready for Beatles at the Ridge coming up September 20th and 21st. This is a free 2-day Beatles Festival with great bands, arts and crafts, food and entertainment, including Louise Harrison's remarkable group, Liverpool Legends. Now, Jude and I co-host the 2-day Beatles Symposium, and it brings revered guests from all over the world. In fact, this year we are so thrilled to have with us one of the most respected journalists of the 1960s North American tour, Mr. Art Schreiber. He was with the Beatles during that 1964 North American tour, and he's going to share his memories of that tour with all of our symposium guests on Friday night, September 20th, during the festival. And everyone is invited to this free symposium.
Yeah, we are so excited to have him with us. He was with the Westinghouse Network and was really a respected journalist. And we are also going to have our featured author, Jim Birkenstadt, who is lovingly known as the Rock and Roll Detective. Jim penned the Amazon bestseller, The Beatle Who Vanished, about the life of drummer Jimmy Nicol. And on top of that, Jim was also the historical consultant for Martin Scorsese's film, George Harrison, Living in the Material World. So, very fortunate for us, he will show that film at the symposium and will set it up for us, and then after the film, answer questions about how it was made.
And, Jude, on top of that treat, we'll also have a featured author, Ken Orth, on hand, and he is going to display his incredible collection of art inspired by the Beatles. He's going to give guided tours of his collection and share insights as well as other authors there, who are Terry Crane, Patty Gallo-Stenman, Jim Ryan, poet Terry Whitney, musician Cameron Hicks, radio show host Alison Boron, and Erica White of BC The Beatles, also a previous guest on our show. And our new wonderful MC for this weekend will be Susan Ryan of Fab 4 New York City Beatles Tours. What a lineup of great guest speakers. You are all going to love it.
So guys, mark your calendars. It's coming up again September 20th, 21st, Friday and a Saturday. It is the time of your lives in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. Again, the festival is absolutely free, no admission charge, no parking, no anything, and it is full of wonderful speakers and music and all sorts of things going on for 2 days. Liverpool Legends concert is free on Saturday night. There's just a wealth of riches to be gained in knowledge and fun that weekend, if only you are there.
And speaking of knowledge and fun, we know a place where the music is right and the lights are always low. We know a place where you can go. And no, it's not Liverpool, England's Cavern Club this time, but this magical place is right down the street from the Cavern Club, just a few doors away. It's called the Magical Beatles Museum, and it is owned by today's special guest.
That is absolutely right, and I have been just smiling so widely that my face is about to explode because we have a great treat for you today. Our guest is a very special person. I met him a long time ago in the early 1990s when my husband and I went out to see Mona Best's legendary Casbah Club before it was renovated and reopened to the public, and he was so kind to us and so patient, letting us ask questions and take photos. He is so warm and genuine and funny and just a great host to all who visit the museum. He is, without a doubt, rock and roll royalty, the son of the great Mona Best, who served as the manager for the Beatles after they released Alan Williams and prior to the time when they acquired Brian Epstein. Mona, as I'm sure all Beatles fans know, was a force of nature and a lovely, lovely lady, great entrepreneur, and so is our guest today, her son.
Our guest is also the brother of the gifted Beatles drummer Pete Best, who supplied that exceptional backbeat for the boys from August of 1960 to August of 1962. And Pete is touring the world these days with his own group, the Pete Best Band, who are much in demand. But that's not all. He is also a co-author, along with his brothers Rory and Pete, of the book titled The Beatles, The True Beginnings. And he's the son of our beloved Neil Aspinall, who was the truest of friends to John, Paul, George, and Ringo throughout their lives. We are honored and most delighted to welcome to our show Mr. Roag Best.
Hi, girls. It's great to be here.
I'm just so smiling, Roag. There could not be a more beautiful sound than that Liverpool voice.
It's mesmerizing, for sure. Thank you for coming on today, Roag.
That's a pleasure.
We love having you here. It's hard to know where to begin, Roag. You've really accomplished so much, I mean, even since I just saw you last. So let's start first with the place that you were so generous to show us, the Casbah Club. And for those few people listening who don't know its role in the Beatles legend, would you kind of fill them in and tell them about the Casbah and then tell everybody how you restored it and what happened next?
Well, the Casbah Coffee Club for many years was the footnote in Beatles history that was missed. For a lot of Americans, dare I say, the Beatles began for the Ed Sullivan Show, and then you get a passion for a group, and you want to know where its roots are, where they started from. So they start gravitating, you start looking for the roots of this band, and then mistakenly the roots of this band is accepted as being the Cavern Club on Matthew Street, which isn't actually true. The group started 2 years prior to that at a club 4 miles away from the Cavern Club called the Casbah Coffee Club. And the Casbah Coffee Club was started by our mother Mona. She watched a program called the 6-5 Special. And on that program, she saw a coffee bar in London called the Two Eyes Coffee Bar. And the coffee bar was the launch pad for groups such as, let me think now, Tommy Steele, my mind's gone blank. Jimmy Nicol actually started the Two Eyes Coffee Bar. A host of other bands. She was so intrigued that by the end of the program, she turned to her husband Johnny Best and asked John, was there any rock and roll coffee bars in Liverpool? And of course, there wasn't any. So she says, why don't we convert the cellars of the house into a rock and roll coffee bar? Pete and Roy and their friends will have somewhere to hang out. We can put rock and roll groups on. It won't inconvenience you, John. I'll manage it. What do you think? And he thought, over my dead body. That's not going to be happening here. Of course, Mo being Mo, the work began the very next day. 8 weeks to go. She needs a band. She took a young girl aside, which was really like the Casbah's rock and roll aficionado, a young girl called Ruth Morrison. And she asked Ruth who she thought was the best rock and roll group in Liverpool. And Ruth said that group is, in fact, the Les Stewart Quartet. No one's ever heard of the Les Stewart Quartet, and the reason that Ruth recommended them is because one of her closest friends was in the band, a guy called Ken Brown, whom she brought to the house a couple of days later. Mo sat with Ken, agreed that the Les Stewart Quartet were going to play on the opening night. They were also going to have a Saturday night residency. Ken was immediately put to work. He had to start helping out, getting the club ready as well. And then Ken comes to see Mo. He's got bad news. The Les Stewart Quartet split up, but him and the lead guitarist would like to open the club as a duo. Well, she said, absolutely no chance of a duo. She wanted a rock and roll band. And Ken panicked at this point because he really wants to play. He said that himself and the lead guitarist from the Les Stewart Quartet, whom, by the way, was George Harrison, could form a band in time. That George had a couple of friends who weren't doing anything. He was sure he could get them to the house the following day, which he did. George rocked up the following afternoon with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Mo took them around the club. It wasn't finished at this point. They were all still working away. She discussed the deal with them. They agreed the deal. She asked John what the group was called. He said, well, in view of the fact that we've only been formed literally 90 minutes, we haven't got a name. But he used to have a group called the Quarrymen. They'd used that name again. So they were all immediately put to work. So John did a ceiling in one of the rooms. So that ceiling's he did like a Mexican Aztec design on the ceiling. So that room is known as the Aztec room. Paul did a rainbow ceiling above the original stage area. John and Pete did these coloured blocks across the second stage area, and Pete did a spider web and spider across the back of the stage. John, Paul, George, Pete and Stu did all the stars in the coffee bar area on the ceiling there. Cynthia Lennon painted a silhouette of John above the fireplace. So it's the Casbah's just draped in all this Beatles history. Of course, the Quarrymen begin playing there. The Quarrymen have a fallout with Mo. They go storming off. She opens the door to other rock and roll bands. So then at this point she decides to go to 7 nights a week with live music, and playing on her roster were Roy Storm and the Hurricanes, Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Searchers, the Foremost, the Remo 4, King Size Taylor and the Dominoes. You name it, they were playing at the Casbah Coffee Club. But still coming to the Casbah Coffee Club, even though they weren't playing there anymore, was John, Paul, and Stuart, and George, of course. And they've now got an opportunity to go and play out in Hamburg. The group's called the Silver Beatles. Pete has joined up with Ken Brown. Pete started playing drums. They've formed a band called the Blackjacks, who are very popular at the Casbah. And next thing you know, Pete gets a phone call from Paul, telling them all about this chance of going out to Hamburg, this residency they had out there, and would he join the band? So Pete auditioned, became a member of the Silver Beatles. Off they went to Hamburg. They dropped the silver from the name. They arrive in Hamburg as the Beatles. I won't tell everybody about the Hamburg tale because that's not the Casbah's tale, and a lot of people know what went on in Hamburg. But when they came back to Liverpool dishevelled, George was the first back because he'd been deported for being underage. Pete Pete and Paul were deported for allegedly trying to burn the Bambino cinema down. John and Stu stayed behind in Germany. But at this point, the band was all over the place. You know, there wasn't a band as such. It had all fallen apart. And Pete came to our mother, told her that the Beatles got really good in Hamburg. Would she help them? Would she book them to play the Casbah? Would she give them a regular spot there? And would she look for other work for them? And she agreed. So Pete made his phone calls, wrote his letters. He got all the lads back to Liverpool. The Beatles reformed. And the first date they played in Liverpool, well, not just Liverpool, the first date the Beatles played in the UK was at the Casbah Coffee Club on the 17th of December 1960. And it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, that's amazing. But when we saw it, it really had fallen into disrepair. When did you decide that you were going to fix it up and reopen it?
Well, that came about. The guys who run the International Beatles Festival in Liverpool, they came to Mo, I think it was around about 1988. It was a couple of years prior to, and they, we opened the Casbah, and she was no, and they came, the year prior, will you open the Casbah, and they charmed her in the end and talked her around into doing it. And so we spent, because during this whole time that the Casbah had been closed on the 24th of June 1962, the last group to play there were the Beatles. John, Paul, George and Ken played the opening night, and John, Paul, George and Pete played the closing night. So they persuaded Mo to open up, but from that point, 24th of June 62 until 1988, it had literally become a storage area for the whole family. You couldn't move in the club. It was literally like a rabbit's warren, and it took months to clear it out, to get it ready for this event. Then slowly over a matter of time, it started filling up with items, and then I think it was about 97, 98. And what really... Do you know what really got my goat and sort of gave me the push to do it? This banner went up across Matthew Street. And I was walking down Matthew Street, and it had Matthew Street, the birthplace of the Beatles. And now, don't get me wrong, the Cavern Club played a huge role. I say to everyone, it wasn't where anything started, but it was most definitely a springboard for the Beatles. Yeah. And well, the first time the Beatles played the Cavern, that show was arranged by Mo. She sorted out their first performance there. She persuaded the owner of the club, who was a huge jazz fan, because the Cavern was a jazz club. She persuaded him to take a chance on a rock and roll group, and he did take that chance. And of course, he never looked back. But months and months of clearing it out, and then it gets to 98, I see this banner across the street, and I actually thought, do you know what, if we don't stand up to be counted somewhere along the way here, people are really going to believe that it did all start at the Cavern Club. And so I spoke to my brothers. They said, listen, if you want to do the push to open the place up again, fine by us. So I did, and we opened as a tourist attraction. I think it was 1999, and we've proved to be very popular since.
And you have one of my very favorite people in the world playing there from time to time, Chaz Newby.
Chaz, yeah. He's just a lovely, soft-hearted guy. He's a lovely gentleman, and I, as you already know, when they came back from Hamburg after the initial trip, Stuart stayed out there with Astrid. He didn't want to come home. Paul wasn't playing bass guitar at this point. He was still on rhythm guitar. They needed a bass player to perform, and Chaz Newby had been the bass player in Pete's previous group, the Blackjacks. So they asked Chaz would he stand in on bass guitar. So he had to run round and borrow a leather jacket off somebody so he looked like the other lads. And he did 5 shows as the Beatles bass player until Stuart came home.
He did, and he is just such a sweet person, really a delight to visit with. And I want to tell you, it is a delight to hear someone tell the story correctly, exactly spot on, without embellishment. This is so wonderful. It is just such a delight. Well, your book, The Beatles, The True Beginnings, has been a godsend for me in doing research in the first two books of the John Lennon series. I've used it over and over and over, chronicling those early years of the Fab Four, and I checked Amazon and different book sites, and there are still some copies available. So tell everybody listening what sort of information is under the covers of this great book.
Well, again, Jude, it goes back to the whole thing of people believing that the greatest music phenomenon of the last century and so far in this century, because we're all millennium children, we're one of the few that have seen the change of a century and the change of a millennium. And the Beatles are the biggest music phenomenon of that time. And again, because of this thing of, hey, it started at the Cavern, and so many other facts that were wrong. They were just wrong, and it was really, really irking me. So I started writing. Actually, how that book deal came about, I actually wasn't writing a book. I was basically chronicling everything for the family, for future generations. And a friend of mine came up to Liverpool. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, we've just been in studio." He said, "Yeah, you're always in studio." I said, "Yeah, we're going on tour next month." "Oh, you're always going on tour." "I would do something." He said, "Tell me about something that I don't know." I said, "Oh, I'm chronicling the family's history." He said, "Oh, I'd love to see that." So I said, "Well, come over tomorrow and have a look at it." And he was, I don't know, I haven't seen him in years, but he was really, really high up with Saatchi and Saatchi. And he looked at all this stuff, and he said, "You've got a book there, He said, "You've got a few books." So I said, "All right." He said, "Do you want me to get you a book deal?" So I started laughing and said, "Yeah, go on then." And he called me up. He called me up 4 weeks later. He said, "Yeah, I've got you a meeting. They're very keen. Can you come down to London?" And this is how nonchalant I was being about the whole thing. I said to him, I won't be in London for 6 months. He went, "You're not coming to London?" I said, "No, I'll be in London in 6 months. I'll see them then." He said, "Well, what are you doing in 6 months?" I said, "Well, Zach, Ringo's son." I said, "Zach's given me some free tickets and backstage passes for the Who gig." I said, "So there's a load of us going down to see the Who." I said, "We'll set off early." I said, "I can come and see this book publisher in the afternoon on my way to the gig." And so I basically sat with this book publisher for about 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, while my friends were around the corner in the pub, the whole time thinking, this is really, really taking up valuable having a laugh and drinking time that my buddies are doing. What am I doing here? I should be in the bar with them. And then at the end of this meeting, they went, "You've got a book deal if you want it." And I was sitting there, "Really?" "Yeah, you've got a book deal if you want it." I thought, right, well, I better start writing properly then. And that's how the Beatles, The True Beginnings came about. But as the title says it all, The Beatles, The True Beginnings. The book really tells people how it went down in those formative years, what was really going on, how it really began, where they were playing, who was on the scene, and I'm glad to say the book became a bestseller.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's hardback. It's gorgeous. The photographs are wonderful. It's color. It has all the facts right. I mean, I highly recommend it to people, and they can still get it on Amazon, and it is amazing. So, all right, let's get to the heart of the matter, the really big show, the Magical Beatles Museum. When did you get this idea? When I was in Liverpool the last time, that shows you how long it's been. That was a shopping mall. I believe that Lucy in the Sky restaurant was on the ground floor. Well, you've taken it, you transformed it, you've made it into this amazing museum. Tell us how it came about.
Again, sitting with another friend, and same kind of conversation. What are you up to? And I'm saying, "Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing that." And he said to me, he said, you know what, Roag? He said, you always got a million ideas racing at once. He said, tell me about a couple of ideas that you've done and thought about, but you haven't followed through. Now, the gentleman I was sitting with, Mike was, well, it wasn't just luck. He's a very clever man, but he was a young man that got in at the beginning of the dot-com thing and got out just before the dot-com broke. So he was like retired at like 24, 25 years old. And now he travels around as a motivational speaker, you know, inspiring people on how they can be successful. And he's chatting to me, and I said one idea. He said, oh yeah. He said, well, I wouldn't do that. And I tell him another idea. He said, oh no, I can see why you dropped that. Yeah. And then I said to him, I said I've most probably got the largest privately owned Beatles memorabilia collection in the world. I was thinking about doing a museum. I said, but I never seem to get round to it. And I look up and Mike's staring at me and he goes, you've got what? So I say again, and he went, how many years have I known you? So I said, well, I don't know, what, 4 or 5 years? He said, you've never mentioned that. So I was like, no, it's just something that I do. And he went, no, that. He said, that's the one. He said, you've got to follow through on that. Well, that conversation was 11 years ago.
Wow.
So I decided to start looking for a building, first building, and I also decided that it had to be on Matthew Street, because Matthew Street is the epicenter of Liverpool tourism, and it's also the epicenter of Beatles tourism. So I thought, it's got to be on Matthew Street, and the first building I went after, the guy pulled out of the sale. Then I went after a second building, and the people I was involved with the night before we were due to sign produced this contract and said, can you sign that? And I said, well, what is that? You know, and then when I started reading through it, they had a chapter there that basically my collection would be held in a storehouse of their choosing.
Oh,
you know, no. And I went, no, that won't be happening. And they said, well, if you don't sign that, we're not going to sign, you know, the contract tomorrow for the building. So I said, well, doesn't look like I've got a building then, because I'm not signing that. So that fell through. Then we got another building, which I got gazumped on, and then it was after the gazumping. Oh, gazumping for the American audience means that someone outbid me. You know, the deal was done, and then they came along and outbid me. So and I gave up then, because Matthew Street, there was absolutely nothing left on Matthew Street whatsoever. It's such a busy street. It's such a successful street. No one's letting buildings go, and I was looking like all down and walking back to my car, and this voice shouts across the car park in true Scouse fashion, "Hey, Roag, what's wrong with your face?" Meaning you look really sad. And it was a buddy of mine I hadn't seen for 4 years. So I told him, I said, hey, you know, I wanted to do this Beatles Museum. I said, I've been chasing this dream for 10 years. I said, it's over. It's over. And he said, why is it over? I said, because everything's gone on Matthew Street and nobody's selling. And he said, oh, I've just been offered a building on Matthew Street. I went, what? He said, yeah, about 30 minutes ago. I said, who else knows? He said, no, nobody. He said, he's literally just called me about 30 minutes ago. He said, why do you want to buy it? I said, aren't you? He said, well, I'll buy it with you. So I said, okay. So we shook hands. I said, when can we speak to him? He said, we'll go and see him now. So we literally walked back into town, back to Matthew Street, went and saw a gentleman called Ken Martin, had the conversation with him. At the end of the conversation, he shook my hand. He said, we've agreed on a price. He said, I'm a man of my word, and my word is my bond. He said, you're shaking my hand, so I want you to give me your word that you will not pull out of the sale of this building. I said, that's not going to happen. I said, but while you're shaking my hand, I'll throw all of that back at you, and I'll also add to it that you are not to tell anybody that this building's for sale until we've signed on the dotted line and it's transferred from you to us. He said, you've got my word. And basically, no one knew we'd bought it until we'd bought it.
It's so exciting.
That's great. That all just falls into place. So, Roag, Jude and her husband Rand and I are headed to Liverpool very soon, we hope, and we cannot wait to see the museum for ourselves. I have been getting lots of glimpses of this museum from Facebook and Instagram, which I encourage everybody to follow, and we'll share those links later. But what sort of thing will visitors see when they first come in the doors of the museum?
Well, I actually designed the museum myself, and I sat on each floor. We gutted the whole building. Then I sat on. I gave each floor a week where I sat there with a laptop and a pencil and a load of sketch pads. So basically, the first floor covers 1959 to 1962, and because all the photographs you see from that era are black and white and grey, all the colouring on that floor is black and white and grey. And obviously the memorabilia on that floor is from that period. You can see Pete's Premier drums. You can see George Harrison's Futurama Grazio guitar. You can see outfits they wore in Germany that haven't been chronicled, by the way. People think that they went from suits into leather. There was a whole image between that, and the reason people don't know about it is because they weren't photographed. But there was a whole image to the Beatles that happened between the suits and the leather, so that's on that floor. A lot of other items on that floor. And then when you go to the second floor, which is 63 to 66, at the back end of 1962, people started to see colour photographs. And TV went from black and white to colour. So when people were playing snooker on TV and they're saying he's now gonna go and pop the green ball, and you're looking at it thinking, but all of those balls look the same colour.
Yeah, right.
So they all look the same. He's going to pop the which one's that? They all look the same. So the second floor is all colour. It's all different colours, and on that floor, funny enough, which has just fallen into our hands, we've had a lot of press about it. We have an NYPD ledger which covers the Beatles' first time in the States. The Ed Sullivan Show, Carnegie Hall, staying at the Plaza Hotel. Also on that floor is there's items from Help. There's John's military regalia from how I won the war.
Love it.
There's the gifts that Elvis Presley gave to them. No one ever mentions in any of the books that Elvis Presley gave them gifts. Why don't they mention it? Because they don't know. But he did. He gave the Beatles gifts at the end of their meeting. Those gifts are in the museum. Then once you've done that floor, you go up to 67 to 70. Originally, we did that floor all white because we wanted to have psychedelia moving around the walls, and that's how we originally set it up. And then one of my partners came in and went, "Jesus Christ!" And I went, "What? What's up?" He said, "This is like being on a trip." So I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's exactly what it's supposed to be representing."
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah." He said, "There's one thing though." So I said, "What's that?" He went, "I'm so busy watching the walls change and move around, I'm not looking at the items anymore."
Yeah.
I thought, "Oh, that's a mistake." That was one mistake that I made, but we changed that. So we kept it all white, but we've just got all these different beautiful still projections that change on the walls. And on that floor, you can see the cello from Blue Jay Way. You can see John Sgt. Pepper medals. You can see there's stuff from Yellow Submarine. There's items from their visit to India. There's the Mauritius beads. There's one of George's zitars. We've got something from every period of time, from practically every album they did. It's all there. 59 right through to 1970. There's nothing like it, and we've said, and we stand by it. It's the most authentic, original, and unique Beatles museum in the world.
Man,
that is so spectacular. Well, we enjoy hearing and reading the stories about your mom, Mona Best, and she did some fabulous things. She was so before her time in encouraging the music scene in Liverpool. And we were wondering, do you have a display that pays tribute to her at some point in the museum?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and in fact, one of my business partners was he's been a school friend of mine since we were about 12 years old. No, tell a lie, since we were 14 years old. We met each other by having an argument in the queue for the cafeteria, and ended up beating the hell out of each other on the pavements, and then we got dragged back into school and got caned and put on detention, and we had to walk home together, and we were walking across the field, and we decided where we going to go back up to the punch up that had been separated, and we both decided that wasn't a good idea because neither of us were really winning. We were just really hurting each other, and then we carried on walking along, and the next 30 minutes of the walk we were actually in hysterics laughing, and he said to me, hey, do you want me to call for you in the morning? Aww. So I said, yeah, go on, call for me. So he called for me. That night he came into the house. Mo took a real shine to him, and he became, a brother from another mother. It was strangely enough, his name's Alan, and it was Alan who said, listen, if we're doing this, we have got to have a section that's about Mo. And so in answer to your question, girls, yes, there is a big nod to Mo.
Fabulous. That is fabulous. And tell us, Roag, what about your father, Neil Aspinall? He played such an impactful role in the story of the Beatles, starting out as their roadie and their engineer of safety, and he remained with them through thick and thin, and they were the best of friends. He went on to be the CEO of Apple in the 70s also. Is he represented in the museum as well?
Yeah, because a lot of the collection, it started off items that my mother had given me, and then there was items that Pete had given me, and then of course there's items right through the museum that my father was bringing back to the house. Because if you read reading books, and this is like why I wrote True Beginnings, to be honest with you, and I've still got another 2 books in me that I just haven't got round to doing, but I will get round to them. I've got 2 other projects coming which I won't talk about right now, but you're going to love them. I've got another 2 projects coming, which we are working on at the moment. But those items coming into the house from Neil as well, and then I started collecting in my own right about 30 years ago, which is how the collection came about. But going back to books, the books lead people to believe that Mo and Neil's relationship was a flash in the pan, and I was the result of that. The truth of the matter was they were actually together from 1960 to 1968. They were together for 8 years before they split up. And 8 years in these modern times is longer than most marriages last. So, so they were together quite some time, and they stayed friends. Strangely enough, even when they split up, they stayed friends. Which we all in the north of England we find this quite strange. It's definitely part of the north-south divide because I see this all the time because I split myself between Liverpool and London, and I'll be at a party in London, and there's Joanne who used to be married to Bob, but Joanne's now with Jim, who was Bob's best friend, and Bob's with Anne, and Joanne knows Anne from school, and there's Derek, who used to be with Cynthia, but Cynthia's now with Bill, and everyone's really friendly and laughing and joking, and, hey, we were together, but we're not now, and that's how it worked out, and everything's good. In the North, if you split up with a partner, that's it. They're dead. You don't want to see them again, ever. There is no way on earth that you are going to be in the same room as them under any situation, ever. So that's a definite difference between the North and South of England. In the South they will, in the North, absolutely not.
No, because you're passionate people. The North is where all the passion resides. That's where it is, Well, another person we cannot fail to mention is, of course, Pete. And when I contacted you about being on She Said, to talk about the Beatles Magical Museum, we had talked about having Pete on another show, and you responded that Pete's taking a year off just to relax and enjoy life, and that is absolutely wonderful for him, but for all of us, we have to admit we're a little bit sad, and we hope that he's going to be back on tour really, really soon. Any chance of that?
Well, I have got some news, because he phoned me sort of beginning of December, and there was all contracts pending that I was going to do at the end of January. And people who work with me know that January is when I sign the contracts and that. And Pete says, hey, can you pop round to the house? So I go round to the house, everything okay? He says, yeah. He said, I've been thinking about it, kid. He said, I've just been working and playing and doing this since I was like 16 years old. And, I'm going to treat myself to a year off and travel and just enjoy my family. And I went, okay, yeah, well, have a good Christmas, see you in the New Year, and I'll bring those contracts round. So in the New Year, I walk around, and hey, here's the contracts, blah, 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 and he looks at me like I'd grown a second head, and went, no, I said to you like 3-4 weeks ago, I'm taking this year off. And I looked at him, I said, oh, are you serious? Are you really taking a year off? And he went, yeah, I'm serious. I'm taking a year off. So I said, will you play Best Fest? Because that's sold out. That's sold out. So he said, well, I'll do that. He said, but that's all I'm doing. So I said, okay. And then there's been all sorts of offers that have come in. He just said, no. And then I've just persuaded him to do another show, which we're announcing in the next few days. He's going to do an audience with Pete Best at the Magical Beatles Museum on Monday the 26th of August. Ooh. So he said, okay, he said, one concert, one audience with. And then we had a gentleman who got in touch with us literally about 2 weeks ago and said, listen, I'm interested in bringing Pete out to the USA to do a show. So I said, when is this? So he said, well, 2020, it's 60th anniversary of the Beatles. So I said, okay, I'll speak to Pete. So I went and saw Pete. I said, this holiday, vacationing thing, time off, I said, is this continuing into 2020? Sorry, And he said, no. He said, it's just this year. I said, oh, great. I said, well, there's an offer on the table to do a one-off show in the USA. I said, do you fancy doing it? So he said, yeah, go on.
Oh, good.
Nice. So I went back to the promoter, told him, and he said, okay. He said, well, what about we turn it into a tour? So I said, I don't think he'll do a tour, but hey, you never know. I'll go and ask him. I'll speak to you in a few days. And then I went and saw Pete and said, yeah, but spoke to Sky. That's a gentleman's name. Great name, that, isn't it, Sky? I said, spoke to Sky, and he's over the moon about you doing the date, and wants to know if you'll do a tour. So Pete looked at me and goes, yeah, we haven't done the USA for a while touring, have we? I said, no, it's been years. It'd be nice to do it again, Pete. He went, yeah, go on, tell him we'll do it. So we are going to come to the States in 2020, and we're touring. We're going to come and tour.
Do you think it would be too soon to start queuing up now?
So But it'll be nice. It'll be nice to come back. Be nice to come back.
That is so wonderful. I am so excited. Well, sadly, because I am loving every second of this, our time's almost up. But give everybody the information. How can they find out more about the Magical Beatles Museum? How can they get tickets? How can they follow you on social media? The whole works.
Okay, well, you can get tickets at www.magicalbeatlesmuseum.com, or if you don't want to get tickets, you can actually walk up on the day. You can actually walk up on the day and come in. If you want to follow us on social media, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. If you want to follow us, you'll find us, and we're good people to follow because we take it seriously, but not so seriously that we stop having fun with it. Because if the fun was to go out of it, we wouldn't want to do it anymore.
That's true.
Absolutely right. And you can see all the fun that you're having in those photos that you're sharing all over Instagram and Facebook. I just totally enjoy seeing those photos when they pull up. So thank you so much, Roag, for being here. Jude and I will definitely be following you and sharing your posts, and we encourage everyone headed to Liverpool to stop at the Magical Beatles Museum in Matthew Street. It's so conveniently located right across the street from the Grapes and the Beatles store. It's in the heart of all you'll want to see, a great location. So make it a point to be there. And Roag, we wish you tremendous success with the museum and all of your other projects. And Jude and I will look forward to seeing you Merseyside in the fall and to sharing a pint or three in the spring as well.
You know we're going to go for the latter, don't you? There's no sharing of a pint. It's going to be the latter. Oh, well, listen, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you both. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you have. I hope the people listening to it enjoy the show. And I look forward to seeing you guys in our autumn, your fall.
Oh, we cannot wait. We are looking forward to it. Give our love to your family, and anything we can do to promote the museum, you let us know when we're there because it rocks. So
thank
we're
you.
there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roag, and you have a peaceful evening, and now maybe you can take a break. Take care.
All right. Take care, girls. Lovely speaking to you. Bye. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Well, in May on the show, we're going to have a real she said head-on debate, our classic comparison contrast format that we love so much. We're going to ask the burning question, who had the better songs during the Let It Be era, John or George? Jude predictably asserts that John wins the day with Across the Universe and Give Peace a Chance, while I very wisely say it was George with I, Me, Mine and For You Blue. Join us for a look at 4 of the great songs that were on the playout tracks as the Beatles wound down to a close, still as brilliant and creative as the day they started. So until then, here's to Food for Thought, Food for the Soul, and Food for the Love of Rock and Roll.
Ta-ra and shine on.